All right, hello everyone and welcome. I'm going to get us started. We are so glad that many of you are here to join us to learn more about battery energy storage for Maine organizations. This webinar is being recorded and we will send along to folks after the presentation. If you are having a technical problem, you can message me directly, but otherwise all questions should go in the question and answer box. This presentation will be around 40 minutes with time for those questions at the end. We will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can and are happy to follow up after the presentation. Now for a quick introduction of our speakers. Jesse Remillard is a program manager at Efficiency Maine and responsible for the suite of custom programs. In his role, Jesse oversees incentive pre-approvals and payments, design emerging custom initiatives, and provides reporting to regulating authorities. Previously to Efficiency Maine, Jesse worked for nearly a decade with an energy efficiency consulting firm implementing and evaluating energy efficiency programs and is a Maine State registered professional engineer. Thanks for joining us, Jesse. And we have Kelly Kaufman, the Director of Energy Storage with Revision Energy. She has been active in the renewable energy industry for over 14 years, with previous roles as a strategic partnership manager for energy storage solutions at NLX North America and sales operation leader for Tesla's North America solar and storage division. As a New England native, Kelly is invested in identifying ways renewable energy technology can help build more resilient communities. Glad to have you here, Kelly. And now off to you, Jesse.
Thanks, Leanna. So Jesse Remillard here with Efficiency Maine. I run the suite of custom programs, including an efficiency program, distributed generation program, and an energy storage or large battery program, which is what we're here to talk about today. A little bit about Efficiency Maine. We are the state's energy efficient. We run the state's energy efficiency incentive programs. And in that role, we mainly provide incentives, but also financing, tools, and educational resources, as well as a database of independent installers for different types of projects that you might want to undertake with us. We are funded primarily by electric ratepayers, but also the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative funds, RGGI funds, some federal funds, as well as other sources. We're governed by a board, which is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the legislature. And that kind of sums us up where our triennial plan is approved by the Public Utilities Commission. And we're currently in the process of getting our plan approved for the next three years of operating budget, which will start July 1st, 2025. So energy storage, why would you care about energy storage or batteries? Well, I think there are three primary reasons why you might care about batteries or energy storage. One would be to manage demand costs of your commercial facility. Two might be to support the integration of renewables. And three is to improve resiliency of your home or business. And just speaking to that last topic, Maine, this chart here shows Maine in comparison to other U.S. states in regard to power outages or interruptions. You see Maine at the kind of top right of the chart. We are one of the states with the most frequent power interruptions, and those interruptions are longer duration than what most of the other states see. So backup power or resiliency is important for Mainers. I think we all experienced that through last winter, maybe not quite so much this winter. So I'm going to give you a quick summary of Efficiency Maine's demand management incentive programs. Then we'll dig a little bit further into the large battery incentive program, which is the focus of kind of today's conversation. And then I'm going to introduce an optional coincident peak rate structure that's available from CMP right now, and that I believe is very conducive to using a battery with that rate. A couple of links here to all those, the four demand management programs. But what do those four kind of demand management programs look like for Efficiency Maine? And I'm going to start from the top here and work my way down. The first is commercial curtailment. So this is simply turning things off. It's not installing anything new, but you'd be turning things off during typical peak demand periods. So all of our demand management programs are intended to reduce Maine's load on the grid when during typical peak demand periods, which is historically summer hot afternoons. Peak demand periods are usually driven by stretches of really hot weather or stretches of really cold weather. So in the winter, we see peak demands around those stretches of cold weather. But in the summers, historically, when the highest load on the ISO New England grid happens, and that is all our programs are kind of targeting minimizing Maine share of that ISO New England, of the total ISO New England load during that peak load period. So the curtailment program, you sign up for this program through a curtailment service provider. There's 3 providers listed on our website. And then they tell you when you need to dispatch. In 2024, they dispatched 9 times. So it's typically, it's not dozens and dozens of times usually. And we'll pay you through the curtailment service provider to shed that load during those peak demand periods. And that would be $35 per kW per season, per summer season. The next program, the EV Managed Charging, this is a delayed charging event. So when you come home from work, you plug in your vehicle. If you have an eligible charger or vehicle, you can participate in the program, and you have an option to opt out if you need to charge your vehicle and don't want to delay the charging. But essentially, if there was a peak demand period, we'd be asking you to, if we can delay the charging of your vehicle until after that event ends. It's usually just a few hours. It'd be till later in the evening or the night when your vehicle would charge. For that program, you get $50 at sign up and $50 annually paid to you for participating. And finally, these two programs at the bottom are our battery programs. We've got the small battery program and the large battery program. Small program is intended for residential or very small commercial facilities. This program, pre-approval isn't required. So if you have an eligible battery system that can communicate with the DERMS provider that we've contracted with, then you'd be able to participate in this program, where DERMS is a distributed energy resource management provider. And they essentially provide the communications, network communications with the devices so that we can tell those devices when to deploy and reduce demand. So this program is intended for folks that already have a battery. And if you sign up and allow us to use your battery to reduce your demand during those peak demand periods, you can get paid $100 per kW of the average demand reduction achieved over the events called. And then the large battery program is what we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about today. But this is intended for facilities that have demand charges on their utility bill. So they're typically larger facilities. And we pay the most for this program because this is intended to influence folks to try and motivate them to move forward with the installation of a battery. And I see a question there. We'll get to that here in a minute. The DERMS provider, I'll have to take a quick look. I don't manage that program that uses it, but I always get it confused with another one. So the large battery program has the highest incentive of the battery programs in order to help motivate folks to move forward with installation. Can you guys still see my screen?
No.
Back in it. So the large battery program, the incentives that we offer through this program are We make awards of $1,000 per kW of eligible capacity that the battery can provide, but that's paid out over a 5-year contract. So we put together a 5-year contract together, and that $1,000 per kW is broken into 5 annual payments of $200 per kW, and that's paid at the end of each performance season. So this is a performance incentive based program. So depending on how well your battery operates, you get paid more to realize that full $200 per kW that you've been awarded based on that $1,000 per kW paid out over 5 years. So the performance season is the summer months. It's June, July, August, and September, where the performance is measured as the average kW reduction achieved over 15 3-hour deployments. And the qualifying deployments are defined as those where the ISO New England load is within 15% of the peak summer load of this installed capacity, this ICAP tag hour, which is the hour of highest load for the whole year on the ISO New England grid. And that determines how many generators have to be available. So the higher the peak load, the more generators have to be available to meet that load. So it determines a large portion of the capacity costs that we all pay for in terms of energy supply. So it's important it's an important number that in time, that peak load, and we all pay proportionally based on what our portion of that load is. So Maine pays based on our percent of that ICAP tag hour load. And so if we can reduce Maine's portion of that load a little bit, then we all pay a little bit less as Maine ratepayers. One of the aspects of this program that's different than the small battery program is that we are looking for the customer and the vendor to decide when to deploy their system. And the reason for that is because these customers typically have more complicated bills, and we want to give them utility bills, and we want to give them the flexibility to choose when to deploy their system. And you would be working with a partner. You'd be working with a distributed energy resource management business or DERMS provider to help you decide when to deploy the battery. Like, when are these peak summer load conditions going to occur? We're not expecting that you would know that. We would expect that you'd partner with somebody in order to determine when that's going to happen. And this is something that's happening throughout New England, where folks are going after this ICAP tag hour, this hour of highest load. And that's what we're hoping folks will be able to hit with their battery systems. So a qualifying event, we're going to take a little bit of closer look at what that means. And I've drawn a yellow line here, 15% below the peak summer load. This is data from the summer of 2023, and I apologize for not having pulled data for 2024 in yet. But every time the blue line crosses that yellow line is a qualifying event. That's when load reached within 15% of the peak summer load. So each one of those is a day, and there were 18 days in 2023 when load exceeded 15% of the peak summer load. And you have kind of some room in terms of both the time of day, in terms of time of day in which you deploy and which day you deploy, because there's a few extra days typically every season with which you could deploy and get a qualifying discharge event. So we're trying to give you some space both to have some flexibility and to maximize your performance payment for the season. In terms of eligibility, it is pretty broad. Anybody who has demand charges on their utility bill is eligible for this program. One of the key aspects of this program and all the custom programs is that we can only pay for projects that reduce grid supplied power. So both our distributed generation program and this large battery program are behind the meter programs. So we're looking to reduce the load that the grid sees. We can't pay folks to export power onto the grid, because it's a different value stack when you're still relying on the poles and wires to transfer that power as opposed to being able to just reduce the power on site directly and what the load that the grid is seeing from the facility. The awards are anywhere from 20 kW to 3 megawatts. We are capping our awards at $3 million for a single project. And that would be a 3 megawatt system, which again be paid out over 5 years, broken into 5 annual payments. System's got to have a 10-year warranty. Warranties have gotten better and better. I know the Tesla Megapacks now have a 15-year warranty. So, this is an area where the technology is maturing, and the ability to collect and transmit data shouldn't be a problem for many of these systems. They're all equipped with pretty robust metering systems and can provide this data pretty readily. Pre-approval required in this program because we're trying to motivate folks to move forward with an installation that they might otherwise do. So we do want to engage with you before you've installed the system. And then customers receiving power at transmission and sub-transmission levels voltages aren't eligible because they don't contribute to the funds with which we are paying these incentives with. Best candidates for this program are going to have consistent loading during the typical summer peak demand periods. So that's hot summer afternoons. They're also going to have a place to put the battery. So we're talking a metal box with an HVAC system usually attached. And there's going to be another metal box that's the inverter, which can sometimes be inside with the batteries. And then there's usually a transformer too. So we're talking 2 to 3 metal boxes, one for your batteries and the inverter, and then the transformer, and then it connects to your panel. And I'm sure Kelly will talk a little bit more about that. And I think good candidates will also have a desire for resiliency, for that backup power, and an openness to explore rate structures and how you might use a battery to reduce demand costs. To get started, you're going to want to work with reach out to a partner or a vendor, such as Revision here on the call, or we've got a list of available battery vendors on our webpage that have expressed interest in doing these types of projects here in Maine. So I'm going to introduce this coincident peak rate structure, which is pretty new to Maine. I'm not sure if these have been around a long time in Massachusetts, but it's pretty new up here. It's an optional rate. So if you have to opt into this rate, you're not going to be put on it automatically. This is only in CMP territory. And just to make sure we're on the same page, there are 2 components of your bill. There's a supply portion of your bill, which is the energy and power itself. And then there's the delivery portion of the bill, which is from CMP. So you have those 2 components of your bill. And if you don't have an independent supplier for the supply portion of the bill, you'll be on the standard offer, which is pretty straightforward. But you may have an independent supplier and have a separate bill than your CMP bill for the supply. So we get 2 components of our bill. This is an optional rate just for CMP, the delivery portion of your bill. It's available for customers that are on a medium general service, an intermediate general service, or a large general service rates. And what this rate does is it shifts costs from the non-coincident peak to the coincident peak. And where the non-coincident peak is the highest 15-minute average load for the month at a facility. And that's what where most of the demand cost for a commercial facility comes from every month. And it shifts costs from that kind of this traditional rate approach or rate structure to the coincident peak. So to what the facility's load is during CMP's highest hour of highest load during the month. And that's this coincident peak transmission that is called the RNS, or the Regional Network Service hour. It's the peak hour of the month for the transmission area. And I believe it better aligns the cost to generate power with the cost of using that power, because it kind of aligns the load at the cost with what your load is during that peak hour, which is what drives the cost. each month. And in the graph here that we're looking at, you can see the blue line is supposed to represent the non-coincident peak. It's at the point of highest load for this load profile. But you see there's lots of peaks. And if you kind of miss one, there's others kind of just below it. So you'd be look to make meaningful difference on your demand bill on a standard bill, you got to trim multiple peaks usually. Whereas with this coincident peak rate structure, you just are going after a single hour. And if you can hit that hour, you probably get some good cost savings on your demand charges. This is approximately what a comparison of a standard large general service and medium general service versus this BCPT rate, and kind of shows how a large portion of the cost is shifted from the non-coincident peak to this coincident peak. Just a little bit more kind of exploring this a little bit further. You don't know when that peak hour is going to occur ahead of time. You won't know until the end of the month has gone by, and you get your bill for the month. So you have to predict, just like with the ICAP hour in the summer, when this hour is going to occur. Historically, it is mostly generally occurred from 5 to 6 p.m. or 6 to 7 p.m. So CMP, the peak hour ending 18 or 19. We don't particularly, in this graph, we don't particularly care about the CMP peak load. We just care when it's occurring. And it's pretty predictably happening, late afternoon is generally when it's going to happen. It's just a matter of figuring out the day. And folks in Massachusetts have been doing this for quite a few years. There's a study referenced here where the participants, this was one of the primary revenue streams that participants were going after, and they were largely successful in deploying their battery systems during this monthly peak hour. You see above 80%, and there were a number of participants, and typically looking at 4 to 6 discharges, maybe up to 10 discharges per month in order to hit that hour. So really great rate structure, very conducive to having a battery. And I encourage you to reach out to CMP and work with them to explore that if you think it might be of interest to you. You do not have to use that rate to participate in our program, and you do not have to have a battery to be on that rate, but it's just a rate that is lends itself to having a battery in order to minimize demand costs. Finally, wrapping up here, I got kind of an example project. This is loosely based or roughly based on a project that we've awarded that I'm pretty sure is going to be moving forward. It's a pretty large project, and definitely economies of scale come into play here. But there are the 4 primary revenue streams or cost savings that are coming into play with such a project, at least with this project. And that's the ITC tax credit. It's a hefty upfront kind of discount on the system cost. Of course, our incentive, which is performance-based and going to be paid out over 5 years. And then at least this project is going after both demand cost savings on the supply portion of the bill and the delivery portion of the bill, where the delivery is the transmission and distribution there, the T&D demand savings, and the supply portion of the bill is that ISO New England capacity tag savings. That's it. I'm happy to, if you have additional questions for me, happy to answer them at the end of the, after Kelly's presentation, of course. Feel free to follow up with me offline if desired.
Thanks, Jesse.
And hand it over to you, Kelly.
Wonderful. Let me pull up my screen. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly Kaufman. I'm the Director of Commercial Energy Storage at Revision Energy, and we are a mission-driven, employee-owned renewable energy company that operates in Northern New England. We have over 480 employee co-owners who are spread across Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. And the core of what we do is we provide our customers with turnkey installation services. And for commercial, that Those technologies include solar PV, energy storage, and EV charging. One of the other things that we do is we partner within the space to make sure that we can identify opportunities for our customers to get the full value from their system. We oftentimes consult with our customers about how to invest in grant and financing programs to offset the upfront cost of systems, and relationships and connections with DERMS management providers, as Jesse mentioned in his presentation. The reason we're here today is because energy storage allows Maine businesses and communities to use energy flexibly and be resilient in the face of increasingly difficult weather challenges. Energy flexibility is important because it gives you control over when and how you interact with the grid, and that opens up the savings and revenue potential that your system can unlock. Similar to what we saw in Jesse's presentation, there are a lot of different value streams that you can take advantage of when you can control how your power is dispatched. Also, as we saw in Jesse's presentation, weather-related electrical outages are becoming an increasingly frequent and longer duration problem in the state of Maine, especially for coastal regions. Energy storage, because of its flexibility, has the potential to help solve multiple problems for our businesses and our communities. At a facility level, though, what does this mean for you? So energy storage is intended to integrate into your existing meter or panel so that you can control when you pull power from the electrical grid without changing how your business operates. The idea is that you want to be able to participate in some of these opportunities without having to actively manage. The benefit of energy storage is that you can do this in multiple ways. So one way is you can set up the system to help offset your demand charges and control your load so that you're lowering the demand portion of your bill, as well as that capacity tag factor that's associated to larger electrical users in the community. The opportunity for customers to use energy storage for this capacity or the ones who see the most benefit are most often customers who have larger equipment that they're turning on and off, or loads that they're turning on and off throughout the week or throughout the year, and see that spike in their load profile that is increasing how they're being charged by the utility. The battery does an excellent job of shaving that peak in order to lower your overall demand spend on your electric bill. This battery also allows you to effortlessly participate in the market services programs like the Efficiency Maine Incentive Program. It can be configured to dispatch during the event windows and then reconfigured to go back and optimize based on how you need to use it throughout the rest of the year for demand shaving and other applications. And finally, we can also set it up for resiliency if you install the correct equipment to allow your system to switch to off-grid mode. In the case of an outage, your system can continue to discharge the remaining power that is stored in the battery and help to continue powering emergency loads such as lighting or heat and temperature controls. But if it is interconnected with other devices, other generation sources like solar or a diesel generator, it can continue recharging and continue powering through longer duration outages as well. So let's talk about considerations that you'll want to talk to your energy professional about. First consideration is the location for the battery, and this comes up a lot with our customers. It is recommended that energy storage be sited in an outdoor location whenever possible and offset from the building by several feet. If you have an area where there are other large equipment is located outside of your building, that might be a good place to look at first. And customers have often considered leveraging a portion of the parking lot or pouring a new concrete pad on the exterior of the building to house the system. It's possible to install energy storage indoors. However, you should be aware that the building and fire safety codes for your AHJ or your authority having jurisdiction dictate what is allowable in this instance, and they tend to be fairly strict. So navigating code compliance can be very complex, which is why we recommend working with an experienced energy professional, especially if you're trying to install an indoor energy storage solution. Next, you'll want to take into consideration what other technologies you're trying to integrate. Most often we see customers who have an existing solar array or an existing generator who'd like to link their energy storage or couple their energy storage solution directly to those generating sources, or maybe configuring those resources to be set up at a later date. All of this is just something you want to take into account before you get started, because that will dictate how your system is designed with different components, sizes, and ultimately the value stack that is driven from that system. An energy storage solution comes with software and controls platform, and this is the brains of the system. So this is what will be set up to manage your charging and discharging without manual intervention. Most of these software platforms are machine learning algorithms that are set up to optimize based on the longevity of how long it's installed at your site. So it continues to learn from your use. It is also set up to help with resetting the system after discharging for a major event, like an efficiency main discharge window, so that you can go back to your main application of peak shaving. And finally, while you may not need to manually intervene with the system, you probably want to know what's going on site with the device that you've installed. So it's good to ask about the monitoring platform. Many monitoring devices these days will allow you to see all of the integrated technologies, such as solar generators and EV charging. So be sure to ask about what your monitoring package would include once it's installed. When it comes to selecting your energy storage system, it can be challenging at times to tell the difference between one metal box versus the other. But realistically, it would take a lot of time for me to deep dive on what are the key differences between these systems and the complexities of the manufacturing and design space. So what I'll focus on are the key pieces, which are coming in every system, the battery modules, and the inverter for the system. These are designed to be configurable to allow you to tailor the power and capacity of your system against your facility's load. And the reason this is important is because you don't want to be paying for excess equipment or power that ultimately isn't driving value at your site. And so taking into account how your load profile occurs on site, and then making sure that you talk about how it will integrate into your facility so that the designer can manage the different components that will go into the system. There are a lot of components that we'll take a look to include in the system, but the good news for you is that most integrators who design these battery cabinets have anticipated your needs, and they've made room within these cabinets so that more and more of these systems are being shipped and installed as a package, and that allows for faster installation time, more efficient installation time, and ultimately is a benefit to you for maintaining the system and keeping it in the protected space. One other thing that you should be aware of is that when selecting equipment, the UL listings the system meets are important to verify, because your AHJ will have an approval process that you need to meet based on the type of equipment you're installing. The manufacturer will also designate what the installation requirements are for that particular system, such as outdoor installation required or other types of necessities to maintain the manufacturer's warranty. It can also be considered a breach of code if you're not following the manufacturer's instructions. So it's important that you make sure that you understand what you're signing up for. As revision, we make sure that each of our systems sold come with a manufacturer's warranty as well as a revision workmanship warranty, because we want to ensure that our customers have a place to call if they're experiencing an issue, and there's a path to resolution either through the manufacturer or through us as the service provider. A typical process for getting started is actually fairly simple. I know a lot of these considerations sound a little bit daunting, but it really starts with just understanding what your goals are and setting up a call with a professional that you trust to talk through what those goals are. That professional should be able to take you through some guided questions to help identify some of the factors that I identified earlier in the presentation. And help you get to that design and system size that's going to meet your needs. A site visit is usually going to be required to firm up any design assumptions around the system and just make sure that measurements can be taken and you can verify access points for getting equipment on and off site. But once you enter into a contractual agreement with an installer, ideally that installer is taking care of all of the approvals and the engineering and construction piece of that project. So for example, when we enter into contracts with our customers, we would first ensure that that project gets pre-approval for a market services program. As Jesse mentioned, you'll want to pre-apply for the Efficiency Maine incentive. That's something a certified professional can help you accomplish early on before you start installing your system. You'll want to make sure that you get full electrical and mechanical engineerings that will go into the construction set. The utility interconnection process can be a little bit daunting if you haven't gone through it before. And depending on the size of your system, you may be required to go through some form of interconnection study to ensure that the capacity of your system isn't exceeding the eligible capacity of your substation. This is something that can be navigated based on the size of your system and based on which utility you're working with. I mentioned the AHJ, again, the local permitting, state and federal permitting are all things that you're going to navigate for code compliance, both building and fire safety code compliance, and making sure your system has been tailored to your AHJ specific needs. The installation for the system, thankfully, since most of these systems are now being manufactured to be more efficient and come either pre-shipped or easy to install on site, the actual installation period for these systems can be fairly straightforward. Depending on the size of your system, you could be looking at a few days, maybe up to a week or a few weeks, depending on how large your system size is. But take into consideration that ordering and shipping that equipment can take some time. So that is why it's a good reason to start these conversations early and make sure that you can stay ahead of whatever your deadline might be for getting a system turned online. A certified professional should also be trained on how to commission and properly set up the system monitoring and be able to work with whoever the manufacturer is to troubleshoot that before your system is turned online. I put up this example. It's similar to what Jesse showed in terms of economics for our project. This is a slightly smaller system. This is a 60 kW, 100 kWh system, so on the smaller commercial side. But one of the things I wanted to show is that performance modeling, you should be able to see how your system is tailored to perform based on your load profile. If you're able to collect interval data, this bottom right-hand graphic shows the load for an example facility. And in this case, the spikiness of this load means that the battery is able to shave those peaks and deliver on more demand savings for the customer. It's also possible that if you're in CMP territory, you may be eligible for a rate switch into an optional demand tariff, which with a battery means you can participate in additional demand shaving for savings on your electric bill. Something else that can be modeled are the market revenues that you can expect to get from also putting the system into a performance-based program like the Efficiency Maine program. In this model, for example, we've modeled the revenues out to a 5-year term, which is the length of the contract you would enter into for the first round of the Efficiency Maine program. This is very conservative because there's nothing that precludes you from re-enrolling in a market services program after the expiration of your contract or identifying other market services programs that you might be eligible for. So keep in mind that conservative modeling just based on known factors doesn't preclude you from future value with the system as well. That DERMS management or market services management, as I've termed it here, is an important piece to this system. When you get into programs that require you to adhere to a utility or an ISO New England peak, that's not necessarily something that your staff are probably tracking. And so the importance of working with a professional DERMS management company, or as they're sometimes termed curtailment services provider, CSP, is really pivotal to maximizing the value for your system. Revision partners in this space in order to connect our customers with CSPs that we've worked with. Customers also are eligible to bring their own CSP to the table. But the core of what these companies deliver is the connection with the utility to not only track historical events, but also receive signals that the utility may send out of impending events that are coming within the next 24 hours. This allows the CSP to schedule a dispatch of your system during that event window. Whatever power is available within your battery to dispatch at the time of that event will be released. So if you've been using that battery early in the day for peak shaving, you may not have 100% of a charge, but rather you can discharge as much as available in your battery, lower your load, and the CSP will track that performance in order to capture and report back to the program administrator, for example, Efficiency Maine, to let them know how your system performed and to capture that revenue on your behalf. Now, there is a fee for these types of services, and every company is different, but generally what we've seen is that fees are based on a percentage of the revenue earned on behalf of a customer. And this is important for you as a customer because if the company has not performed and there is no revenue generated, you do not owe a fee against that service. But it also gives your provider some skin in the game to make them motivated to maximize your revenue as well. In that way, you're earning revenue for your facility, and you're also participating in a solution for your community to benefit the other ratepayers that are within the grid. I just want to highlight again that starting this process should be fairly simple. Don't feel like you need to have all of these items identified. Really what it starts with is setting up a conversation. Knowing what your key pain points are or what your objectives are is important to having the first call with a professional. It is helpful if you can gather copies of your most recent electric bills. If you're on a third-party supply rate, gathering a copy of that bill as well so you can see the different mechanisms that you're being billed on. And collecting 15-minute interval data for up to 1 full year will allow a provider to generate your load profile. If you're not sure how to gather this information, reach out to Revision or Efficiency Maine. We can help provide information as possible, or call your utility. If you're not able to access that information, that's okay. Set up a call, talk about what your options are, and just make sure this is a right fit for you. Thank you so much for your time. This is my contact information here. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions, but otherwise I will stop sharing and we can enter into the Q&A portion of this webinar.
Thank you, Kelly and Jesse. That was fantastic. I've seen some questions come in, but if you have any others, please feel free to put them in the question and answer box, and I'll be able to share them with Kelly and Jesse for their answers. The first one here, thanks, Robert. We have, do the battery backups installed outdoors still function efficiently at below freezing temperatures? What's the loss in efficiency during the colder months?
So I can take that. Every system is going to be different. Generally speaking, the systems that are installed outdoors are usually enclosed in cabinets that have some kind of internal temperature control system. And so depending on the manufacturer that you work with will determine the efficiency loss. We are seeing systems get more efficient over time. I don't want to give you a general quote to say like this is the efficiency loss because it is very different based on the manufacturer. But that is one of those questions you can ask when you're vetting your equipment to say, is this rated for cold weather temperatures, especially in the northern Maine climate? And how many systems has this manufacturer installed in my region to know if they've prepared for this kind of scenario?
Thanks, Kelly. Jesse, this question looks like it's for you from Robert. Can
Yeah.
you talk a bit more about the dispatch scenarios? You mentioned a few of dispatches annually. Are those dispatches focused only during summer months? What is required or expected? Thank you.
And I understand that this could be a little bit confusing. I was kind of speaking about dispatching to go after the that optional rate that CMP offers, which would be year round. But I also spoke about our program, the incentive program, and what you would need to dispatch for that. So for the incentive program, that is just the summer months, June through September, and 15 dispatches total. So that's all you would need to do on an annual basis. The rest of the year would be up to you how you want to use the battery, how you want to discharge it. We would just be asking for the 15 dispatches during peak demand periods during the months of June through September.
Thanks, Jesse. And we have a few others in the chat here. I know we've answered a little bit, but I'm going to have you speak live, Jesse. If you could talk a little bit about what Efficiency Maine's current assessment of how fragile the tax credits for battery investments are, one, for those commercial applications, and two, for nonprofit applications.
This is a big question mark at this point. I think I don't know that anybody can really predict. My personal guess is I think the ITC is fairly safe, but I don't think I'm not a tax professional, and I really am not sure.
Thanks, Jesse. We had another question here in the chat. Are there funding opportunities through Efficiency Maine that support off-grid batteries?
There aren't, because it's all about reducing grid supplied load. So reducing the load on the grid. So if you're not connected to the grid, there aren't the benefits that we get benefits from reducing load on the grid. And that's how we're paying. That's what we're paying folks for, is that reduction in load on the grid. So if you're already off the grid, nothing there for us, unfortunately.
All right. Are there any other questions that folks have? Feel free to put them in the chat or put them in the question and answer box. We have Jesse and Kelly for a few more minutes. All right. Well, we'll make sure. Oh, one just came in. This is a good one. What is the strategy to avoid virtual peaks?
Not sure I understand the question.
And I'm not totally following what we're trying to reduce load during peak demand periods, or reducing the peaks on facility load profiles. What is meant by virtual peaks?
All right.
Virtual peaker is the terms provider that Efficiency Maine uses to determine when to deploy the small battery and the EV managed charging programs.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We will be able to follow up with this recording and make sure that you have both Kelly and Jesse's information as you dive into this. They are both experts in their fields and willing to share additional information. So we'll make sure to send that along. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.